South Africa. So we'll get started just by introducing ourselves a little bit. My name's Abby, and I'm a senior at UNC Chapel Hill. I study global studies and economics, and last summer I lived in South Africa in Cape Town for 2 months, and there I was working in a legal aid clinic. So I was doing that a lot of the time, but I also got to explore Cape Town and several other parts of the country as well. And one of the things I really loved getting to do was to learn about and try lots and lots of new foods.
Hi, my name's Jing and I go by Sharon. So I come from China and I lived in China for almost 6 years before my family moved to the US. And I have a great interest in Chinese traditional dance. So I danced that for more than 10 years and it was my hobby before, and currently I'm kind of forgot it, but I hope I can pick up soon. And then so today I want to talk about some food in China, and I'm really glad to meet you guys.
So first we're going to show you where our countries are on the map. So if you look at this map on the left, you can see South Africa in red. And like it says in the name, it's at the very southern tip of the African continent. And then here on the right, you can see a closer up view of the country of South Africa. And I've put little blue stars on some of the cities that I'm going to talk about. So Cape Town is down here, and that's where I stayed for most of my time in South Africa. Over here is a city called Durban, and one of the foods I'm going to talk about came from Durban originally. And up here is a city called Johannesburg. And this is a really big city in South Africa, and also one that I'm going to mention related to one of the foods.
Okay, so you guys can see the red signal symbol on the map, and this is China, and which locates in the East Asia, where bordering with Russia here, South Korea, Japan here, and some other countries down here. And these are the major cities in China, like the capital Beijing, the economic capital Shanghai, Hong Kong, and other cities like Guangzhou. And my hometown is Hangzhou. So I will talk about food in different places, and the food have different types just based on they are located in north, south, west, or east, and which means they're really different because of the geographic location in China. And next, we want you guys to guess what are these two foods, and you guys can type like your answers if you know it.
Yeah, if you want to guess in your classes and and have your teachers type your guesses into the chat, and then we'll see if anyone guessed it right.
Okay, we've got one guess: chicken feet, burger pie, meat pie, African shepherd's pie. Let's see if we have any other ones. Those are good guesses. Chicken feet?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So those are some great guesses. So the first one, the South African food, y'all are right. It is a meat pie. And this one specifically is an ostrich pie, which was a really interesting thing I got to eat. Yeah.
And this is called steamed phoenix and clouds, which is the chicken feet. And it usually serves in dim sum restaurant, and people will have this as breakfast.
So we're going to do 3 different topics of foods, and our first topic is unfamiliar foods in these countries. And so in South Africa, one of the first foods I'm going to talk about is bobotie, and this is a very common dish all over South Africa. You'll find it in almost every household. Lots of people have their own recipes. They add their own twists to it, but you'll also find it in a lot of restaurants. And this dish is a blend of Dutch and Malaysian influences. And so the Dutch are one of the people that colonized South Africa, and they're from the Netherlands in Europe. And this dish is similar to shepherd's pie in a way with the minced beef. And so that's the influence from Dutch. And then the Malaysian influences, there's a lot of Malaysian spices that get thrown in and add flavor to the meat. And so I mentioned a couple of the ingredients. Minced beef is the main ingredient of the dish, as you can see. And then, like I said, there's a lot of spices that get added in. Sometimes they'll mix in some chopped up vegetables into the meat. And then there's this egg wash on top that kind of gives it a glazed top, and then the bay leaves, which is a very symbolic image of baboy tea. There's always a bay leaf or two on top. And then chutney is also something that often gets paired with baboy tea. And over here is an image of the main brand of chutney in South Africa. And chutney is kind of a jam type substance. It's, yes, similar to jam, but it can be spicy or sweet. And this also comes from Malaysian influences or South Asian influences, and is paired most commonly with this dish. The next food I'm going to talk about is bunny chow. And this is one of my favorites because it's delicious and the name is fun. And this dish originated in the town of Durban, which I showed y'all on the map, and specifically in the Indian community there. And so what is it? It's a loaf of bread taken and the middle pulled out, and then the loaf is stuffed with Indian curry. And so then you eat the curry out and then pick the bread off as you're going. So it's kind of like a bread bowl. And where would you find it? This is most often found in restaurants in South Africa. People do make it in their homes as well, but I saw it more commonly in restaurants and less made in people's own households. And this is really symbolic of how strong the Indian influence is in South Africa, especially along the coast. And a lot of this comes from South Africa being a major stop on trade routes from Europe to South Asia. And so the going of back and forth between those places, they would stop in South Africa. And so they got a lot of influences of food and culture from both Europe and South Asia. And so there's really strong Indian communities in South Africa and also strong Indian culture. And so there's a lot of Indian foods, samosas, curries, are very popular all over the country. And so this is very representative of that. And the last food from South Africa that I'm going to talk about is Chakalaka. And this food or dish originally came from Johannesburg, which is another city that I showed y'all on the map. And it was created by gold mine workers from the Johannesburg area. The mine workers would come home from work and basically just take any and all of the foods they had and throw it into a big dish and cook it up together and eat it like that. And that's what turned into the dish that's now called Chakalaka and is very widespread over South Africa. And as you can see, it's a tomato-based dish. So tomato sauce and chopped tomatoes make up the majority of the dish. And then there's also onions and chopped vegetables in there. Often beans get added as well. And in this picture, you can see that there's some eggs on top. That's less common, but this particular photo I took in a market, and there's lots of these weekend markets that pop up around South Africa, and a lot of times it's just lots of different food stalls, sometimes people selling other things as well, but they really take a lot of traditional South African dishes and add unique twist to them. So that was what was happening here with the eggs on top. They were adding a twist into the traditional chakalaka dish. So you wouldn't normally see that if people were making it on their own. And from that, so when do you eat it? You can eat it in the markets like this, but it's most often eaten in gatherings with friends and family. It's a great dish to make in large quantities, and so people will throw it together and share in meals with family and friends.
Okay, so the first unfamiliar foods in China I want to talk about is called liu sha bao, which is one kind of dim sum. So these are the different dishes that will be served in dim sum restaurants, and it is originally from a province called Guangdong, and this is their favorite breakfast and brunch. So they will have different kinds of dish in a whole breakfast. Mostly will include 12 to 20s, and each of them are only served a little bit, so you can try like different kinds of it. And its Chinese name is called 早茶, which means morning tea. So obviously you will drink tea in the morning and also have some dishes for breakfast. So the type of food liu sha bao is actually the sweet buns filled with tasty melted salted egg custard. So you will first have some buns, and then you put it into the container, and then you will steam it, and then you will have eggs put into the buns, and then they will become have done it together. And this is one of my favorites in the dim sum restaurant. And the dim sum restaurant also have like Chinese people will have this restaurant in the United States, and I hope you guys can try it here. And the other food I want to talk about is called Piton, which means century egg. So this is one of the unbelievable foods that BBC News have ever talked about in a documentary, because it looks really like weird, but it's really tasty. And the ingredients are the eggs preserved in clay, ash, salt, and quicklime and rice hulls. And it has over 600 years of history, and it is originally from Hunan province and since Ming Dynasty. So people will cook it as just side dish served with rice, or they will cook with rice porridge, and it will serve in a dim sum restaurant. First, you will have the rice porridge done in a rice cooker, and then they will add piton to the rice porridge. And the other use of it is using a Shanghainese recipe, and they will mix with some eggs and chili tofu, and you will have it before you are having the dinner.
So our next topic, we're going to talk about important foods and important food categories to each of our countries. So in South Africa, the most important food really is meat. Meat culture is very important across South Africa, and as you've probably already seen in some of our dishes, meat is a big part of a lot of traditional South African dishes. And so part of the meat culture is something called a braai, which is what we would call a barbecue or a cookout. And braais are very, very common. I think here we may have a barbecue every once in a while, but they have braais all the time. And that's because family and community is such a really important part of South African culture. And so braais are really a place where they celebrate how their families and their communities and just live together and cook together. And so that's why it's such an important part of South African culture. And so another part of meat culture is hunting. A lot of people in South Africa cook or create their own meat products and hunt for their own meat. And so they'll do this in game parks all over South Africa. And a lot of people also travel to some of the bordering countries to go hunting. One of my friends' uncles who lives in South Africa was talking to us about going hunting in Namibia, and that was one of his favorite places to go hunting. And so in hunting, there's game reserves that you would think of where you would go on safari, and those are protected, and you can't go hunting there. But there's also game reserves that are specifically for people to go hunting. And so that's an important distinction to make. And so from hunting your own meat, people then prepare a lot of their own meat, and that's drying their own meat, cooking their own meat, creating their own sausage and stuff like that is really common to see. And so different ways that they eat meat in South Africa, pies, like we saw the pie at the very beginning, that's really common. Meat pies are very big food that you'll see in restaurants, in homes. It's a very popular meal. Biltong, which is similar to what we would think of as beef jerky, although people in South Africa don't like you to compare biltong to beef jerky because biltong is very natural, very non-processed, and they are very proud of their biltong, whereas beef jerky is often a lot more processed. So in this picture, this is biltong that I got to eat, and you can see the labels of all the different types of biltong here. And so often comes in just little chunks that you would eat, and you can buy it from grocery stores. There's also little stores all over that are specifically biltong stores where you can go and get like a brown paper bag full of it. And again, people will make it in their own homes as well. And then boerewors, this is like sausage. It's often made in one big long spiral, and they'll put it on a grill like that. It's probably about this big. And then so at a braai, they would put it on the grill just as like a big sausage patty. And then after it's all cooked, then they'll cut it up. And again, like all of these things, they'll make it a lot of people will make it themselves. And droros is like biltong as well. It's a dried meat. And if you look closely, it's a little bit in the shadow, but this one over here by the eland is droros. And the main difference there is it's shaped differently. It looks more like a Slim Jim than beef jerky, and because of that, it's in a like thin casing, like a sausage would be, whereas the biltong is not. And so there's lots of different types of meat that we wouldn't normally see. So ostrich, like you saw, kudu, which is a huge deer-like animal, but they are very, very large. And then zebra. Zebra is not super commonly eaten, but you can find it in restaurants. It's more often made in tourist areas because people come to South Africa and think that's something that people will eat all the time, and so they'll make it for the tourists, but you won't see that people eating that in their homes very often. Lamb, beef, things that we have more commonly in America. And then some of the other different ones are springbok. And springbok is a very small animal like a deer. And springbok is actually the national animal of South Africa and is the name of the South African rugby team. They're the Springboks. And then eland is also another deer-like animal, and they are bigger as well. And one of the cool things about both kudu and eland is they have really spirally horns, which I got to see a lot of them, and they're just very cool to see. And so, yeah, overall, meat is just really the biggest part of what makes up South African food, and the culture around it and the way they add it into their dishes and make it and hunt it is all very important to South African people.
So I will talk about the important food, noodles in China. So noodles was a record. It was created since Han Dynasty, which is 206 BC to 220 AD, and then they were used to known as soup cake. So they are not like longer, thin noodles, but they are like a cake. And then they have the production process of 6 steps. First, you will cut. So the dough is rolled out into a flat sheet at first, and then you will fold it and then cut into noodles as as like the width that you are desired to get, and then you will get extruded. It is called 挤压, which means the dough is placed into our mechanical press, and then you will hide it through which the dough is forced to form the strands of the noodles. And then you will peel the noodles. So a firm dough is mixed and formed into a long loaf, and then strips of the dough are then quickly sliced and peeled up of the loaf, and then you will directly put in the boiling water. After that, you will pour the dough, and it is rolled into a long cylinder, which will be repeatedly stretched and folded to produce the thinner noodles. After that, you will knead it, and then which means a ball of the dough is lightly rolled on a flat surface, and then you will put it together with one of your hands until it is formed into your desired width. And then finally you will get flicked. A soft dough is prepared and placed into a bowl, and then you will put the noodles directly into the boiling water after you have done this. So there are different types of noodles, and then some types are different because of the location. As you can see on the picture, so here is my hometown, and it's called Hangzhou, and we usually have the noodles with shrimps and seafood because we are near the sea here. And other locations like here is called Sichuan. If you have ever been to a Chinese restaurant, there are a lot of Sichuan dishes, and they are really spicy because they are in the mainland and they don't usually have a lot of food, so they will have to use preserved the dish with spice. And then other noodles like here, which is in Shanxi, and this province has a famous noodles called dao xiao mian, which people will use the knife to cut the noodles and put it really thick, and it tastes really different from others because this one tastes more likely like cake other than a noodle. And different from others, this one is called liang mian. Liang mian is a cold noodle compared to other hot noodles, and they are usually served in summer rather than winter because when you have the cold noodle, you will feel like really cool. And another famous noodles is called Lanzhou La Mian. It has different types of width for the ramen, and then for each one, you can ask the server how thick do you want for the noodles, and then they will make it for you. So it's kind of like personalized noodles, which is really interesting.
Okay, and then our last topic is going to be foods that may be familiar to some foods that we eat commonly here. And so in South Africa, this is a very common dish. And so I was going to ask in your classes to think about what American food does this look similar to. And then also, I want everyone to try and guess how to pronounce this. So if you can raise your hands and do that in your classes, and then just type a little "we're done" or a thumbs up in the chat.
So some answers are chili, refried beans, lasagna, or what it looks like. Chili, beans, chili.
Okay, so it sounds like a lot of y'all think that this looks a lot like chili, and I agree. I think it does look like chili. I think it's actually more similar to barbecue because this is all meat, and it's meat with a sauce. So it's very similar to how we would eat like pulled pork barbecue here. And so hopefully y'all guessed as well how to pronounce this word. So it's actually pronounced poikikos, and it is a Afrikaans word, and I would have never known how to pronounce it if I hadn't been with a friend who was from South Africa, and she told me how I pronounce it correctly. And it means pot food, and so potjie is just the word for pot, and so this is the potjie pot, and that's what makes the dish what it is. They're always cooked in these potjie pots, and so it is very similar to barbecue in the US. It is just pulled meat, and they'll make it with several different types of meat. This one specifically is kudu, which I talked about with the biltong. And then a sauce of choice. So just like in the US, how people like different barbecue sauces, they also will make this with different sauce bases. And so some of them are sweeter, some of them are spicier, and that's just personal preference and also family tradition. Recipes often get passed down through families, and so people will have their own versions of this dish. And sometimes when I ate it, it was just meat and the sauce in there, which is common, but also sometimes like vegetables and potatoes will get chopped up and added in as well. And so when you eat it, this is very similar to chakalaka. This is a common dish to make at a braai or for a family or friend gathering. And just make it in a big pot, and everyone will serve their own and sit around and eat together and share in time and community together. And then the other food that is probably a lot easier to recognize is pizza. Pizza is pretty common in South Africa. We saw it all over the place in Cape Town, and just like here, you can get pizza in a restaurant. There's pizza restaurants, or in other restaurants there'll be pizza on the menu, and then there's also lots of different fast food pizza restaurants that you can order in. And so here you can see Debonair's Pizza is one of the most common pizza fast food chains, and I was told before going to South Africa that you have to get Debonair's Pizza. It's amazing, and it tasted, I think, pretty similar to our fast food pizza here as well, but it was really yummy. And then this is pizza I had in a restaurant, and one of the things that is different is they often have different topping combinations than we do, and one that I saw everywhere that they had pizza was bacon and banana. People there love bacon and banana pizza, and so we had to try it, and it was delicious. I was skeptical at first because it seemed like a strange combination, and to have banana on a pizza was something I'd never thought about, but it was really good. So if you're ever making your own pizza at home, maybe you'll think about trying this combination. I would definitely recommend it.
Okay, so as we all know, that fast food is really like global to every country. So in China, they also have McDonald's and KFC, but the recipes for like hamburgers or chickens are really different, which makes it more delicious to Chinese people. Like, but they also have some special food in Chinese fast food restaurants. So like this one is called old Peking chicken roast. So Peking chicken and Peking duck is like really famous there, and then they will use the traditional flavor of a Peking duck and cucumbers, some like specific sauce that they made in a restaurant to make this like chicken roll really delicious. And the other thing is porridges, and it is also served in breakfast in McDonald's. And as we talked about before, the Piton, so because Piton is also like always served with the porridge, so they have the Piton chicken flavor porridge in McDonald's, and they will also use the bamboo, which is really popular in China, to serve with the porridge as well. So obviously we will not have like the chicken roll and the porridge in the fast food restaurant in United States, but because Chinese people like it, so they will have like some unfamiliar foods in China, because their people like it. And the other familiar food is the seafood. So we have different cookings for seafood, like barbecue for this picture, or just steamed, which is you will not have a lot of flavor, but the original seafood flavor when you steam this, when you steam them. And some people will also like to eat the raw one, just like this. And so people will always eat seafood when at dinner or at supper, which is different from US because there isn't a lot of late night restaurant in US, but in China people will always have those kind of foods with friends, like in like 2 a.m. in the morning, and after they have like drink party or whatever. And we have eat different types of seafood like shrimp, lobster, crabs, squid, shellfish, as we can see on the picture, and which is usually common around the area beside the sea, but not mainland. But a lot of people will like even fly to the cities which is famous for seafood to try seafood. And yeah.
So we wanted to ask y'all some questions to see what you learned. So we have 3 questions here. Do you remember 2 important foods from both South Africa and China? What are the most interesting foods to you from both places? And then for our middle and high school students, what did you learn about the culture of the place and around food in both of the countries? So if you want to raise your hands in your classes and answer these questions to see what you learned, your teachers can type your responses in the chat or just say that you've answered the questions.
For South Africa, they said they love their meats. And China loves noodles. Meat pie in South Africa, dim sum in China, they remember, ostrich pie. Noodles, bunny chow. They base their meals on geographic location. They want to try bunny chow and chakalaka. Chakalaka and dim sum. McDonald's and KFC in China. Some cultures don't eat chicken. Noodles and Piton. Chicken feet and zebra. Biltong.
Great. Thanks for answering some of those questions. And we're glad that you learned some about the food in both these places. Now it's time for y'all to ask us